Hello, this is Alan G. Davison, Mitchell Sanders, many different names over the years. I've yet to actually stick to one, surprisingly enough, except for my name that I was given, but that's beside the point. Anyway, it's been a couple of days, but I went to the Equestria Girls in theater. I went with a couple of friends, my fiance and a friend of hers, no, friend of mine. Oh, dear God, it's so confusing. Anyway, I saw quite a few reviews on the internet. Not a whole lot, but enough to get a general idea that a lot of people who seem to have a big name in the Bronydom community, or at least bigger than mine. But then again, pretty much anybody who's even had a picture posted on Equestria Daily or fan fiction on Equestria Daily, or even you know even maybe two people following them on YouTube, probably have a bigger name than I do. Anyway, I got back from it, and I compiled a couple of notes the day afterwards, and I just didn't really have a whole lot of time in order to actually sit down and put my thoughts onto paper. And I have to admit, if there was one thing I liked about this, it was the slight gags that they actually tossed around in the actual movie. I loved the gags. The one with Applejack carrying the table while the other two boys were, trying to do it together, and they just seemed so surprised. The talking dog that they actually did in the trailer was, yeah, even though I'd actually already seen it, I did actually get a really good chuckle out of that. Also, who gave Pinkie Pie the script? As a lot of people have actually found her complaining about that, but it's kind of like it's Pinkie Pie, all right. I just don't bother questioning it anymore, and to be honest, it's actually kind of funny. Um, let's see here. There was also Cheerilee's. I think it was Cheerilee. I'm pretty 100% certain it was Cheerilee, but it was in the library that the CMC of this universe was watching their video on. I'm guessing probably YouTube, because who watches videos on anything else these days? Unless they somehow manage to get it on Blip, but who knows. I digress. After she sort of shooed them away from the callback to season one, she has this perfect facial expression when Twilight asks for her help. It just sums up, in my mind, how working with people works in any media, be it fast food, public speak, and like just anything where you have to do something for someone else, like just people things. And she had this great facial expression of just pure rage and frustration, and then it just disappears behind a smile, like the briefest of seconds, and then she turns to face Twilight, and I'm like, yeah, that was anybody who even has ever had a job in that department probably knows how that feels and has had one of those days. To be honest, my notes are really, really out of order, and so I'm gonna be basically just running shit down. To be honest, I don't really have anybody to bounce off with today. I'm kind of flying solo. Another thing one thing I did have some things that bothered me. I'm not gonna say this is a perfect movie. Sunset Shimmer, Snips and Snails, as well as Flash Sentry being the weakest of the overall characters. Not so much Sunset Shimmer. She was somewhat interesting, especially towards the end when she finally managed to get a hold of the crown. And I have to admit, after having watched the entire event go through and progress, they seem to actually think a lot into the small little details, and I've noticed that nobody ever brings that up. Twilight not having any family, the fact that she has to stay in a library while being a good callback to the actual TV show itself. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't have any family. When you just pop yourself into a different time or a different world, you have nothing but the clothes on your back and the things in your pockets. And it was a realistic interpretation. She didn't go to any of the schools, or the classes for that matter, even though she was hanging around the school. And it makes sense. An individual her age that's walking around the school isn't going to get questioned, even if nobody even really recognizes her. I have to admit, I am kind of surprised they didn't do a double check on the background or anything when they actually let her go to the dance. But, two steps forward, one step back is still going forward. Anyway, the uh, the eventual climax with Sunset Shimmer. I kind of stumbled across that name there. Having Spike kidnapped after making a threat about Spike while he was in the school was also nice foreshadowing. I knew something was going to happen with Spike, but I didn't. But I was thinking she would have been craftier about it or more manipulative, because throughout most of the story she was the manipulative. Refrain from swearing. So I digress. You get the idea. So it was kind of interesting to actually see her, threaten Twilight for the crown, and then Twilight calling her bluff, like completely and totally legitimately calling her bluff. And it's like she couldn't live in this world. It wouldn't work really well for her, especially with her at this high school age. So she seems pretty smart. So I'm gonna go under the assumption she called Sunset Shimmer's bluff. And it's kind of like it makes sense. I mean, she wouldn't really be able to do anything with Spikes so much, and it was all about just getting her in front of the mirror. So, good case of getting things around. And speaking of capturing, Snips and Snails really got degraded into nothing more than henchmen for the story, and I was like, really? I didn't much care for that. I really didn't. I felt like they're colts, all right. They're kids in the actual TV in the My Little Pony TV show itself. And while they did fanboy out, I mean seriously, I don't even know how I'd react if I actually met someone who I recognized their name and their face. Like that'd be like, what? I mean, I'm pretty sure I'd probably fanboy out at the very least a little bit, and it would be completely and totally humiliating, and I would probably be very easy to manipulate in such a situation. But in this one, it just doesn't work. I mean, for Trixie, it kind of made sense. They looked up to her, they envied her, they honestly thought she was everything. But with Sunset Shimmer, I can't help but think that this was complete total. But I wouldn't call it, well, it was nice to see them, I guess. They were definitely different from the basic character designs of most of the other people who usually shared some standard structure, except for, like, I think Big Macintosh. He really stood out in terms of, physical presence. But, yeah, it was really depressing to actually see them delegated to nothing more than a couple of henchmen. And they weren't even all that funny. I mean, a lot of their appearances in the actual TV show has got something to do with childish or stupid slapstick in some way, shape, or form, outside of their incidents with Trixie herself. Like the bubblegum incident with the CMC's newspaper episode. Can't even remember the name of that, but I remember the event itself. But, slapstick comedy. And it's kind of like, you know what? I could have kind of bought it if they'd actually taken a page from Bulk and Skull and actually been bumbling henchmen or something like that, or maybe even counterproductive henchmen, kind of like Bebop and Rocksteady, or botching something. But they were so successful and not all that funny. It was like they just used the character's appearance and their name, and they didn't really bring anything back from the TV show for the character, which they did with Trixie. We actually saw her speaking in the third person when she was talking with Twilight for that brief moment, which it shows that they did their homework. The writers know what they're doing, and it feels off. Another thing that kind of bothered me, but still made perfect sense within the context of the story, was the Twilight walking around, getting used to things. The library scene was a little difficult to watch as they were pulling out their cameras, their camera phone, whatever thing, and taking pictures, and I was like, I know what they're going to do. I saw it the instant I saw that. I knew it was going to happen. And another complaint that I actually came across was people are like, they wouldn't have allowed this to happen. No. It's the internet. They put it up on the internet. The teachers, nobody has power on the internet. That's plain and simple. It's the ultimate equalizer. And so when things like that started running around school, there's no controlling something like that. I have to admit, the fact that everybody kind of forgot it relatively quickly was probably pretty realistic too, since you can get humiliated for 1 second and it could live with that one person for the rest of their life, but to every other student in the world, it was last Tuesday. Everybody's usually too much important, so it's too invested with their own life at that point in time to even really be bothered. I know if it happened at my school, I probably wouldn't even have noticed. So I have to admit, I liked the reintroducing some of the main six. It was definitely very different from our original introduction, while at the same time still kind of keeping with characters and stuff like that. I really did like Fluttershy in her reintroduction into the actual story. I just never felt so sorry for an individual in my entire life, actually, knowing full well that she, why she actually got hit with the crown was because she couldn't get any help for the animal shelter, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of depressing. If I'd actually seen that, I probably would have said, I don't really have a whole lot of time, but you just look so miserable, tell you what, I'll help out. And I'm not the type of person that goes out of his way to help out at causes and stuff like that. I mean, if it's something that takes maybe 2 seconds, I'd be more than happy to help out, I guess. I'm not saying I'm heartless, but I'm not exactly the type of person that would go out of their way to volunteer, so to speak. I'm making myself out to be a bit of a jerk right now. That's not exactly a good way to start off impressions, if at all. So before I beat myself with a dead fish any more than I already have, I have to admit, going back to overall appearances and facial expressions, it's probably one of my favorite things about the cartoon. And this movie, for instance, is just, I love the facial expressions. They're always so much fun just to watch their faces twist with all these little personalities and quirks and stuff like that. If I were ever to actually be in charge of anything animation or facial thing, this is where I would focus. I would make sure the facial expressions were perfect for everything that I'm trying to portray and everything that is not being said. Back to the characters themselves, I have to admit it's kind of funny to actually see this. I think the main six's worst enemy is not Discord, it's not Queen Chrysalis, nor Sombra or Nightmare Moon. It is poor communications. It really is. Hey, I got this terrible text from you. I'm never talking to you again. Well, I'll admit that's usually how quite a few, if not a lot of relationships sort of end after high school or during high school. People just stop talking to each other, which I'll give it props for. That is kind of realistic. That's how most of my relationships with friends actually faded away a lot of the times. Is I just wouldn't talk to them for the longest period of time, and before you know it, it's been quite a few years, and that's kind of what happens. I have to admit, it was interesting to how everybody got brought back together, and then Rainbow Dash sort of got left to the side. Her being brought back to the fold was completely and totally done off screen. It's like, it reminded me of something, to be honest. In the Discord two-parter season 2 premiere, only Applejack and Rainbow Dash really got a scene or anything like that, and it was more so focused on Rainbow Dash being brought back. Whereas in this one, Rainbow Dash, everybody else basically gets their little thing, but Rainbow Dash sort of gets left to the side, except she kind of doesn't, being popular and the face of the fandom in some cases. She gets her soccer game with Twilight, and I have to admit, it didn't really feel like it was entirely necessary. We all kind of knew Twilight would never have actually beaten Rainbow Dash in the skill of sports athleticism, in one-on-one at the very least. So I kind of figured there was some hidden meaning behind what she was trying to do, and lo and behold, at the end of it, you gotta have courage and persistence and guts and heart of the cards and yada yada yada. I have to admit, quite a few of the little moments and stuff that they actually brought through was when they were actually cleaning gymnasium up, gym up in order for them to actually continue on with the show. People actually stopped, saw what they were doing, and came in to help, which followed into one of my more favorite gags of everything in the show movie. Even if I were to have a script detailing everything that was in front of me that I needed to say and how to say it, I would still fuck this up. I'm not an actor. Never will be, never shall be. Anyway, my pessimism knows no bounds, but I still love those little optimistic little things about that. I don't know. Maybe that's why I like the show as well, is that it portrays most people, if not all, in some cases, as generally good people, and I just love that philosophy, mainly because I don't actually think that's true at all, which is weird, but digressing, I'm getting off topic. I do that a lot. Anyway, there was a lot of things that I actually really did like. Even though I did feel like the movie did try to focus a little bit more on friendship for friendship's sake, whereas and I like that. It was a nice little callback, I suppose, and it did deal with a different perspective than than the actual TV show itself. Because let's face it, in the actual show, we're never going to really see the main six sort of break up. They're always going to be the main six. I mean, they'll have their disgruntled issues, I suppose, and they might get turned magically, but we'll never actually see a certain case or point in the actual TV show, I believe anyway. Writers, feel free to prove me wrong, where they will all willingly just spread apart. I think by that time, the show would be over anyway, so I doubt they would ever scrape the bottom of the barrel that badly, where we wrote everyone's character so badly that they stopped being friends. But it was a nice thing, and I think if I were to actually wager a guess onto what I feel the overall moral of this movie is that no matter what, true friends will always be there, even after all this time of being away from them. And I like that. I think it's a good moral lesson overall. Let's see here. I also really liked the beginning part of it. Was Twilight's problems with her wings, her uncertainty of the crown, her literally having to earn it as being a person who leads people instead of just sort of doing a magical thing with the test and the book and stuff. I honestly think this was actually a really cool idea, and I wish that would have been better if they sort of implemented it in the season 3 finale instead of just being a movie sort of aspect. Overall, songs were, as always, pretty good and catchy. I didn't really have any. I don't really retain them all that well, but I have to admit I did bob my head a little bit while I was actually watching them, and overall it just feels so weird as that ending is that they go all Sailor Moon on the. I tried to use the actual Japanese name for them, but I'm not even gonna try. I have to admit, transformations weren't all that good. We didn't really get to see anything with it. I honestly think if they were to try to turn this into a TV show, they might have to just cut the magic out entirely, unless they were to come up with some explanation for why the unicorns are capable of actually using magic. Maybe their hands could glow or something. I don't know. I guess I'm being nostalgic. I remember watching the Sailor Moon series back in the day, and I wouldn't mind seeing something made by Americans in a more up-to-date society, I suppose. Wishful thinking on my part. I know, I'm being optimistic on them actually, pulling something successful out of that, but, again, I digress. I have to admit, there were lots of different little things that I actually really did enjoy. I liked Celestia's appearance, but I didn't much care for Luna, but Luna's scene in the actual movie itself was actually pretty interesting, though. I can't help but wonder if nobody ever considered Photoshop when looking at those photos. But I have to admit, it did give Flash Sentry the one thing that actually made him at least likable in my eyes. A lot of people are always looking at this guy and they're like, he's the cliched love interest. He's the cliched love interest. Well, yes, he's the cliched love interest. You could just first 2 freaking seconds he enters on the screen, he is the cliched love interest. Well, you know what? He stood up for Twilight when she needed some freaking help. You know what? I don't fucking care if he's wasn't supposed to. Well, so much for not swearing. I don't care that he has absolutely no personality. I don't care that he drives this stupid fancy car and that he plays the guitar of all things. I mean, he's just so blatantly perfect, but he does something. He does something redeemable, and I honestly thought it was fucking adorable. I honestly thought it was cute and adorable that the way Twilight reacted. And you know what? That's kind of what a first crush is, okay? You turn red, you stumble your words, and you get embarrassed around said individual. Are first romances ever going to be exactly like that? Probably not. But just watching Twilight light up like a Christmas tree was hilarious in and of itself. It was cute. It really was. I mean, just for those two things, I could tolerate as much as they wanted to shoehorn in, because he was very much entertaining. The whole thing with Celestia and Luna being principal, I kid you not, I really overthought the whole thing. I was like, wait, so if they're the princesses in the regular universe, what is the president the equivalent of in I mean, anyone who's got more authority in the school? I mean, the superintendent is Lauren Faust OC the superintendent? Is Mayor still technically the mayor, or is she now actually work for the school? So would she be the secretary, or would she actually technically in this universe have more power and authority than Celestia and Luna? Oh dear God, I've gone and hurt my head. Like I said, I've actually been spending so much time just sort of thinking like this, and it's kind of like, well, if that's the case, you know, we did actually see Granny Smith as a lunch lady, and while she had no actual speaking roles, she was one of the faces. It was actually kind of nice to see in the background. Her and Trixie were two of my favorite ones. That and Derpy at the end of the credits. I actually got to see the credits and see her dancing with the muffin, which was pretty cute and adorable. I'm a sucker for cute and adorable things. Call it a weakness, but then again, I'm in the right show for it. Let's see here. I have to admit, I was disappointed at the lack of some of the basic background ponies. Dr. Hooms, Lara, and Bon Bon. I was really bummed we didn't really get to see them sprouted around in the actual background. If they were there, I didn't see them. So I was kind of bummed. We got a bunch of people and background characters that we probably only going to actually see in the human form because of the high school setting. The fact that they actually reincorporated cutie marks and stuff like that as different parts of the accessories and stuff. Did I mind some of I didn't really care too much for some of the more girlier aspects, like the dress, getting ready for the I felt quite a bit like the gala, and to be honest, I just wasn't really all that interested in it. They did it well. They did it well for what it is, and as much as I was like, meh, the instant they said high school, there's just some things that kind of come with a high school setting. Usually a love interest that's bland, uninteresting, and serves no purpose outside of maybe saving the day of Ariel style or needing rescued, kind of like what he needed in this one. Flash Sentry actually does something redeemable. It's small, and it could have been done by anybody else, I will acknowledge that, but the fact of the matter is he did something, which is more than you can say for those types of characters. There's usually a dance or promise tomorrow or something along those lines. And there's, of course, the bratty queen bee female character that antagonizes the protagonist, making the protagonist seem much more kinder and nicer in comparison. Going back to the protagonist, I would really love to know what her motivation is. I honestly can't wait for the comic to come out that's supposed to explain her backstory. I love the MLP comics. They are awesome. They bring things up, they bring people back, and now we're finally going to get something we probably would never get in a million years without the actual comic books. We're going to get some backstory on a villain, which is great because her and Sombra have had no background whatsoever. I really hope they do actually do something with Sombra later on. They've had Nightmare Moon, they've had Queen Chrysalis, which were the two villain antagonists that we never really did get to see a whole lot of, and you know, Discord's kind of been redeemed, so that leaves us with only 3 technical villains from the 3 seasons that we can really work with in the comic book. So I'm kind of hoping that they'll do something with him. Whoa, shit! I'm really off topic now. Sunset Shimmer. I didn't really like her too much. She didn't have anything interesting. She didn't have the flair or the personality that Trixie did when she was first introduced. She didn't have the intimidation factor or mastery or knowledge or anything that really seemed greater than Twilight. I mean, say what you will about Sombra being a bad villain, at least he had presence. Nightmare Moon had history and everything else that's kind of linked to her, and being the first villainess kind of helps it in her favor as well. But she was bigger, she was intimidating. What we have here is no quirks, very little personality. The only thing that was even remotely interesting about her to begin with was that she was a former student of Celestia. Would have loved to have seen more of that, instead of sort of kind of getting reintroduced to some of the main 6. I mean, in some cases it didn't even really feel like a reintroduction, but she became interesting when she got a hold of the crown in my eyes. I saw tears streaming down her face, and her personality did a complete and total 180 after she turned back to normal. And it's kind of like, she didn't think that, she knew something, but I don't think she clearly understood the demon possession or whatever that thing was with the crown. So I think she went into this half baked or something like that, because that seriously shook her up. And I mean, it didn't shake up Snips and Snails seemingly that much when they transformed. In fact, they were ready to go when they got transformed. Another problem with that. So I saw tears in her eyes, and there's got to be something more to this. There really does. It's kind of like with Trixie's moment where she drops her her third person during the Ursa Minor attack. It's kind of like, damn you, Raiders! You managed to make me just interested enough to care, and that's usually all it really takes to be a lifesaver in this for your antagonist. I mean, we haven't really heard anything about some of the other antagonists that have kind of cropped up, like Gilda, the Dash rival, and the Wonderbolts. I can't remember her name. Remembering names was never my thing. The Flim Flam brothers. You know, most characters like that, they're one-offs. They didn't really show that they had a massive amount of depth, except for the Rainbow Dash's rival, Lightning Dust. Got it, Lightning Dust. She had some depth to her, but that's more from personality based off of what we know of Dash and the type of person Dash is. So it's kind of like that might have rubbed off on her a little bit, in my opinion. But she was trying to become a Wonderbolt, so that indicates that she's got some semblance of a goal, some semblance of a personality, and hopefully some semblance of inspiration. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did bring her back in some way, shape, or form. But I'd be even more like expecting if they didn't do anything with her at all. But yeah, it's kind of like there's something there. There's got to be something there. Even if it's minute. But to be honest, we're probably never going to see her again unless we have more Equestria girls, since I think it's 30 moons. That was always something that bothered me. 30 moons? How long is 30? We were kind of talking about that towards the end, at the end of the show when we were walking out. We're like, 30 moons. And is that full moons? Regular moons? I mean, does that mean it's a month? It'll take a month for it to open back up? Or is that full moons? Like, and that's to be about 2.5 years in order for that portal to open up. Um, I have to admit, you start to really think about this, and you can tear it apart, but at the same time, it really makes you wonder. With Sunset Shimmer, it's kind of like, so at the most, she had to at the very least survive an entire month on her own in an unknown environment and try to pick everything up as quickly as humanly possible. Or she had 2.5 years, which to do something very similar. She had to financially support herself in some way, shape, or form. She had to figure out the rules of the universe, the world itself, to a degree where she's capable of inflicting a level of fear inside of the entire school, which I find kind of implausible, but she did it. It's in the show. It's canon. And so it's kind of like she not only had to figure out the human world, she had to figure it out to a degree where she could manipulate it almost flawlessly. Almost being the key word here. So it's kind of like she had to have been damn smart. And it kind of puts a couple of flaws in some of the other character things, like tripping over Spike's tail, and she could just use magic. I mean, Twilight used magic all the time to levitate the bloody crown. Why couldn't you? I don't know. Maybe she didn't know. I'd kind of like to know how in the world she actually knew about the crown. I'm beginning to wonder if maybe she just thought bringing a magical artifact into her universe would. Honestly, it's like you think about it one way, and you could come up with like, wow, that was really smart, and she'd have to be pretty crafty to do that. And then on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, that was stupid. I mean, so many little moments and stuff. It's kind of like, anyway, character design. I have to admit, this is a lot better than the original promo stuff. Their overall appearance, I didn't much care for it at first, but it grew on me over the course of the movie. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't mind seeing more of this nonsense. It's mindless, it's adorable, it's about friendship and ponies, but I like the comic books, and I like the TV show. Why can't we have a series of movies that at least try to follow the same spirit? Maybe they'll get better at it. I have to admit, a lot of people have actually had their complaints with it, and there are some flaws, there's some problems, but this is their first shot at it. This is their first, going out there, and to be honest, it's a lot more interesting than a lot of other crap I've been subjective to. The Bratz live action movie, some of the Barbie movies. I mean, you got to admit, as hand-fisted as it kind of came into it, it was entertaining. I mean, I laughed. There was actually some adults there that had brought their younger kids, and they actually laughed. They actually had a couple of jokes, and in my personal opinion, it was entertaining, and that's the best thing a movie can be in my book. It's entertaining. It had the great facial expressions. It took itself at least serious enough to actually bring up like little things like where she was going to sleep, getting around. I have to admit, it was a little difficult to watch some of the more embarrassing moments as Twilight tried to figure out the world that she was in. And while everyone kind of will poke fun and poke logic, you know what? If I want a logical experience, I'll go read a science book or a textbook or something like that. There's your logic for you. I have to admit, it was nice getting to actually see things done again. Lots of callbacks, little bits and pieces. I think I'm just gonna string this up. I honestly thought it was a fairly good and entertaining movie, and I'd probably sit down and watch it again if I really felt the hankering to, but I don't think it deserves the hate it's getting from a lot of the bigger reviewers and stuff. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to disagree. Feel free to agree. And then maybe guess I'm probably a lot softer on movies and stuff like that than most people are. So I came in with expectations of this being another sync thing that I could probably just rip and tear apart and stuff like that, and just look at and be like, no, 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 no. But I came away entertained, enjoying, and a little bit more thought provoking than I would have actually considered possible, considering the subject matter. But hey, I think it was worth the time and energy it went to go see it.